Hello and welcome to Calmversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's Calmversant is fellow YouTuber Jackson Warfield. His content is focused on board games, and he approaches the subject matter with wit, alacrity, and a manly lust for fun. In this conversation, we talk about his lust for fun and the ins and outs of being a board gamer and board game reviewer, and I highly suggest his content. Head over to it. Linked in the description. Without further ado, here is Jackson Warfield.
Is this better? Is this?
I can hear you.
Oh, great. That's very important for this.
Yeah, it's kind of essential, actually.
Yeah. Is the audio good and it's not crackly or anything?
It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. I balance all the different ways of connecting with the ways I connect during my day job and things like that. So
yeah. You don't want to cross the wires or the streams?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I have my day job, my Zoom installation for work stuff is zoom.gov, for example. So like,
okay.
Yeah. So
Fun.
It causes IT issues and things like that.
Oh.
So I think that might have been related. We'll see. Yeah.
Well, that's cool. Well,
Yeah.
okay. Hi, NSA, if you're tuning in.
I can't say they're not here, I guess.
What general work do you do? Are you IT guy or a contractor or kind of stuff? If you don't mind me asking.
Yeah. So I work in aerospace and defense. So I do like forecasting, a lot of, I'm on my computer all day, that kind of a thing. But board games end up being a nice break though from being on screens all the time. I actually work with, I work from home. I actually work in front of my board games during the day because they make me happy. So I like that being nearby. And actually probably why I like board games so much is because it's off the screen. I have some like coworker friends that they're more video gamers. And to me, it's like, I'm not fully unplugged when I play a video game.
Yeah. Yeah. What did you study in college or post?
I was actually a mechanical engineer.
Okay.
So
yeah.
Yeah.
But forecasting, it sounds like meteorology comes into it or something like that?
Forecasting, more so like trying to predict customer demand, that kind of
supply stuff.
Yeah, so like market forecasting.
Okay, yeah. Do you have an opinion on the direction that the United States is going as far as competence of our infrastructure is headed? Are we looking at a bottleneck with the boomers retiring?
That's been an issue. It's funny, so I work in aerospace, and that's been an issue for a long time. Actually, when I first started working in aerospace for like 10 years ago, it's funny, you'd walk into work and you'd see more 30-year work anniversaries than 5-year work anniversaries.
Yeah.
And I think that's partially because a lot of people started in aerospace, and then you had 9/11, and then you had the financial crisis, and all these layoffs knock off the people with the shortest tenures. So you end up with this like donut distribution. So we've been dealing with competence issues for a while. And yeah, obviously people get worried too about, technical issues at Boeing, like with the 737 MAX issue and things like that. So there are some concerns, but I'll agree that I have some concerns as well. Not so much that I'm trying to change industries necessarily to try and get away from it, but it's a thing.
Yeah. Do you think we can keep the work in-house, or do we need to import skilled laborers? Because that kind of goes into the heart of the immigration debate.
Yeah. Well, we need to, I think, bring some of it back too, because like a lot of the manufacturing type work we do has been exported already.
Yeah.
So that's like the sites that used to do manufacturing and assembly became more so like office work over time. So, and we're already in a spot where it's challenging to bring it back. So I think certain things that, the last few years have actually prompted some of that activity already. Like the war in, war in Ukraine has prompted that a little bit because we've had to start building things here that we had been working with Russia, for example. But it's already started to turn the tide a bit. I hope it keeps going too, because, when you outsource anything as a cost, it becomes a revenue source for someone else, and you lose a certain amount of control.
Yeah, absolutely. On a number of different levels, not to mention like foreign governments influencing the manufacturing, installing stuff, all that kind of weird.
Oh yeah.
High level stuff. What kind of media did you grow up on?
What kind of media? How so?
Well, I guess video games, what kind of movies, what kind of
Yeah.
IPs, I guess is the content creator term, but I just, what
Yeah.
informed your imagination? I mean, even going to church and being religious or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah. So I guess, I mean, I was into video games pretty early on. I was probably like high school years. I played a lot of Halo, for example. I got into, I'm a big Middle Earth fan, but I didn't really get into Lord of the Rings until I actually met my wife in college. And I used to be a pretty big movie buff, especially movies from like the late 80s into the early 2000s. Although, to be honest, having kids and having young kids has made it tougher to go see movies. And I don't know that movies are at the same quality that they were in that time frame. Like, some of my favorite
Variable.
movies. Yeah. Like, besides Lord of the Rings, Memento, Fight Club, Pulp Fiction, some of my favorite movies. And I don't know that there have been, it's like every couple of years, maybe one comes out now that's maybe at that same level.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be my own version of old movies once I start. My kids are old enough to start introducing them to them.
Yeah. Well, in board games, at least in the content creator side, there's this trope of recency bias, right? Where our favorite games are the ones that came out within the last 6 months. But I think the same thing in reverse happens with media, like movies and stuff. We look back at the 90s and we only remember the ones that are memorable. We forget all the trash. And so we kind of assume that it was a higher quality, though it's arguable where the talent is focused right now in the media.
Yeah, that's fair too. And plus, I think I've heard theories, and I'm not an expert on this, but heard theories too about the fact that DVD sales aren't a thing now, and people take less risks on movies.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to be either a reputable IP or something you can guarantee to have sales right off the bat.
Yeah.
Whereas instead, you'd have other movies like things become cult classics, like that would get funded. Like I think Good Will Hunting, I think, is a famous example of that. But yeah, I think there's a little bit of that with board gaming where we think about games we used to play that, and you kind of look at them through rose-colored glasses. But I think the hobby is actually new enough, and like the golden age was really like the mid 2010s, that we just haven't gotten to experience that yet. Like, the games aren't old enough. Because I think I've noticed on my channel that I do have a bit of a bias towards games that were popular when I really became like a board game geek, like aficionado. And my time was like the 2016, 2017, 2018 timeframe. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those games have been imprinted and in my mind of like, these are great. And some of the more recent ones seem like just new versions of it. So okay. I wouldn't be surprised if 10, 20 years from now, people are saying the same things about games as we do about music. Like, oh, it was always the best ones, from when you were, in college or whatever it is.
Yeah. What were the games in the 2016 to 2018 era?
Yeah. So I would say there's kind of a Mount Rushmore of games from around that time frame that were always in the top lists for like the Dice Tower guys when they did their top 10s. I think the games were Blood Rage, Scythe, to an extent, Seven Wonders Duel. Twilight Imperium was like, up until like the Twilight Imperium 4th edition came out, that was pretty high in everyone's list. Cosmic Encounter is a little bit older than that, but that one
started
also
in the 70s or 80s, right?
Yeah, Cosmic Encounter was 1978, I believe, and then the Fantasy Flight New Edition came out in 2008, which might be the second or maybe fourth edition of the game. Mm-hmm. But when the board gaming kind of golden age was going on, which I think was like around 2015 to 2020, that was the game that a lot of people that had been in the hobby long enough to play the game since 2008 were like, this is the best one. This is my number one game. That was pretty common. So,
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what defines the golden age then? Because I remember it was probably like 2006, 2007. Me and my friend got into playing Risk and we got bored of it. Yeah. So we started creating maps. And then I started to discover that there's these things called Euro games. And I think I got Princes of Florence, but there was Dominion was out there. There were these kind of off-market games. They're kind of a niche product. They are defined by having a brown to beige color scheme, like almost to the letter. But then something happened between the kind of older 2000s era, and then it ramped up. Something. Do you have a line on what started to happen?
I think I have a sense of it because my evolution is actually kind of similar. So I was into Risk heavily, like when I was in high school, for example, and that for me that's early 2000s, and I was kind of learning about Catan in the late 2000s. I played. For me, a game I feature heavily on my channel is Hero Escape, and I don't think that Golden Age really starts then. Although a lot of great games come out like around 2008, like Pandemic was one. Dominion, I think, was also 2008. Small World, I think, was 2009. Yeah. There was a lot of the ones that we consider still modern classics came out around 2008. This is to contrast with games for like Catan or El Grande or Puerto Rico from more like the 1999 timeframe. But I think the Golden Age really picked up around like 2014, 2015, because I think that's when, if you look back, you'll see like some of the bigger Kickstarters start happening, like the Kingdom Death Monster Kickstarter, which is a very niche game, but hit like $12 million on Kickstarter, and that was the record for a long time. Gloomhaven, I think, was 2017, so that was right in this time frame. I'm stealing the terminology for Golden Age a little bit from the Board Game Reviewer Shop and Sit Down, because I think actually Quinn's on Shop and Sit Down did he had kind of a little speech on this, or a talk that he would give sometimes, saying that we're in a board game golden age. And I think that was the right way to put it. And whether it got better or worse, I think the golden age kind of ended around the late 2010s, or maybe like when the pandemic started, because you now had so many games that you kind of lost a little bit of that monoculture that makes it feel like like everyone's playing the same new game.
Yeah, pressure cooker. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that the golden age is probably then late 2010s, and now we've seen, still high quality games, but it's been in a new phase ever since the pandemic started.
Yeah, and the uptick on solo modes kind of last year, I think, was just a tremendous amount of solo modes in games.
Yeah, and I think I know you had, I think it was John LaRufa on too, that talked a little bit about that. And yeah, the solo modes are interesting because I think, they became more important during the pandemic, but they seem to, it's maybe like when they started coming up with some of the designs, and then now it's really taken hold that you have to release a game with a solo mode. Otherwise it's almost a marketing mistake not to. But yeah, that's one of the ways I think things are evolving now. That's probably honestly might be the most significant one, the way the games are evolving, like within the last year or so. It's just like every game outside of like the tiny ones seem to have a solo mode.
I wonder the impact of mobile gaming on the board game hobby, because apps were the big thing to get into in 2010, 2007, 2010. And I remember when I was heavily into like exploring that whole design space, I gravitated towards more board gamey app driven games, and there was a lot of Kinesia games, and a couple of Uwe Rosenberg games at that point. But I wonder if people started to explore that space and then had a reaction to it, wanting to be in person. I wonder.
I think there was a more strong reaction to the games that required an app to play, and there were a handful of games like that. Yeah. Like that one, people right from the get-go didn't like that. I think the new version of Mansions of Madness has that. The Fantasy Flight Edge Lord of the Rings Journeys to Middle-earth, which had the app, and because people are always worried about obsolescence of the app or otherwise. Yeah. So I think that was maybe something publishers were playing with for a bit and said, this is a cool thing. We can do things with games we never did before. And then the pushback in the board game community made them dial back from that. But as far as like board game versions on apps, I agree, actually. I enjoy playing board game apps more than just mobile games, personally. I think part of that is because my brain thinks I'm playing a board game. And it's like the next best thing sometimes. They're very good, I found, for learning how to play a game before you teach it. Yeah. And to just getting the rules ingrained. Although some board game app tutorials probably take longer than they need to. You're playing a tutorial for 45 minutes, be like, all right, I think I get it now. Yeah, right. Yeah. There's definitely a lot of those now. I think that maybe predates a little bit of the solo mode of when that became a major selling point for games, is that you would have the mobile version, but it wasn't always like you would have the mobile version when you release the game as much. Like they would come up with the mobile version of a game or work with another software developer to make it after the game had been out for a little bit.
Yeah. The relationship between board games and video games There's a lot of different ways to break it down in terms of interface and immersion, but one thing that the computer does is all the calculation. And for board game designers, they can't have too much of that calculation. They can't just shove it all underneath the hood like you can with a video game. So it's interesting that that is a limiting principle, like how the complexity ceiling on a board game. And so something I stupidly re-downloaded Slay the Spire. I found the board game on sale, so I got it. I'm like, oh, this is good. I'm like, oh, I used to play the video game, and it's just like ate in my life. I have to delete it off of my phone because it just takes way too much of my time. But it's interesting that is a Slay the Spire. The board game was a board game, a video game board game or card game, and then they reverse engineered it back into being a card game that you play on the table. And one of the consistent criticisms of it is that there's a little too much upkeep. There's too much management in it. What limits your ceiling of complexity? You got me into Lord of the Rings, the living card game, because you have this excellent series. I don't know why I like your videos so much, but I've listened to it 4 or 5 times. I just really enjoy you going through the whole developmental process, because it seems like one of the best part of an RPG for me is building the character. And so you take us through the story of how they built the game. And so there's this developmental aspect to it, but that is got it's on the edge of how much work I want to do while I'm playing a board game.
Yeah, there's definitely a limit. And it's funny you mentioned app integrate or Slay the Spire, because usually what I go to is Gloomhaven, because Gloomhaven, one of the biggest criticisms of God is the upkeep. Like, everyone forgets to update the elements shelf or something when you're playing Gloomhaven. But then when they made the video game adaptation for it, or the Steam adaptation, it takes care of the upkeep for you. And they're a non-negligible percentage, I think, of the Gloomhaven players end up just doing the video game instead. Yeah. Which I'm not. I played it. I enjoy the game, and I'm maybe a bit of an exception in that I prefer the physical game just for getting table space, and it's funny, I played Gloomhaven over it was pretty much over Zoom at time, like early in the pandemic, with a few friends. Yeah.
And would you manage the table, or were you guys playing on the app?
Not this time. So the app wasn't out yet, actually. Okay. I think this we hadn't tried it, at least. And in this game, I would normally that's my role. But because of equipment reasons, I wasn't the one running it. So we had it's Final Gaming, who I do podcasts with, also is on YouTube and does miniature painting. He was actually the one who was running the game, and then he was like streaming the game to us and 2 other friends, and we were playing it that way. But the upkeep is significant. We actually had like Google Sheets that were tracking our characters too, because we weren't physically there. Yeah. There's definitely a limit. And one of the biggest things I think when you compare board games and video games that puts board games at a disadvantage is just the fact that everything has a rule book. It's almost impossible to make a board game so accessible that it can compete with a video game of someone that's brand new to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We just got a Crokinole board, and that is the most accessible. It's not even. It's more of a sport. My wife and I had an argument of whether or not it's a sport, but it's more of a sport than a board game. But I got it, and Thanksgiving happened, and I had it out, and everybody just gravitated towards it and picked it up immediately, and everybody wanted their own board. So that is like at probably the lower end of on-ramping, like the easiest game to on-ramp anybody.
Yeah, and it's funny because I've thought about that too, is that sports, you could argue, are just really big dexterity games in a way, right?
Yeah, totally.
Like Jenga's kind of a sport. It's
unless we're talking about like lifting, I think everything is more dexterity, but maybe racing, but that's still kind of dexterity in a way.
Yeah, right. I think honestly, if you're going to call it a sport, it probably requires dexterity in some ways. Like, I think there's a spectrum, and a lot of people they really separate in their minds, and they don't step all the way throughout the spectrum. But you go from it gradually. You can walk your way from probably like Catan through games like Crokinole or Cornhole, and eventually make your way to any sport. Yeah, just one step at a time. Yeah, and the Lord of the Rings card game, just to double back to that too, it's interesting because there's, I think with complexity too, like there's maintenance complexity, which is like upkeep, which is really, I think you just want to minimize that as much as possible. And then you can get into the area of complexity within a game's rule set, provided you've internalized it, can be rewarding because you like enter the game space in a way. And like you're immersed more, and you can do more with a game that's more complex, provided it's, that on ramp needs to be there.
Yeah. Why do you think that you like, let's just take, for example, Lord of the Rings, the living card game? What is it about it that would cause you to basically make it one of the centerpieces of your channel?
Yeah, it's kind of an exception in a lot of ways, because I don't like a lot of games that are similar, or at the very least, because of all the things I'm interested in. I play Lord of the Rings, the card game, a lot. I don't play a lot of the other living card games, because Lord of the Rings, the card game kind of scratches that itch for me, and I have other games I want to play too.
So we're talking Arkham Horror and Marvel Champions and maybe Netrunner, which is an earlier.
Yeah. And then like the competitive ones, the cooperative ones are the ones, right? Like the ones I think about the most. I think I haven't played Earthborn Rangers yet. I've heard people say that that's pretty much a living card game too. That's more cooperative. But yeah, you have the living card games like Android Netrunner, and there used to be the Warhammer 40,000 Conquests. Like there are other living card games that are competitive, that are more so like just different ways of doing the trading card game thing. But part of the reason why I like Lord of the Rings, a card game, is, to be honest, partly because it's the one that I have been playing, and after a certain point, when you're in a game long enough, it provides a unique experience that newer games can't provide. But for me, it bounces a few things perfectly. I really enjoy deck construction, so like the before game building out like the 50 card deck, and all the other cooperative LCGs like Marvel Champions, they simplify that, because that is a barrier to entry to the game. But that form of streamlining actually takes away from the game for me. I enjoy the Lord of the Rings theme, and I enjoy, how to say, it's one of the few games for me that I can enjoy as a solo experience, where it doesn't feel like I'm just playing the next best thing to playing the full game. To elaborate on that a little bit. So like a lot of games that have the solo modes now, if they have a solo mode, I always see that as like, well, if you don't have any friends to play the game with, here's the solo mode. And the social aspect of games is very important to me, and that's like where I get a lot of enjoyment from. Lord of the Rings, the card game, I could play cooperatively, but because I have the whole collection, I've done so much deck building that I can get so much from that experience. It's one of the few games where a cooperative experience with someone especially physically close to me is usually going to mean I'm going back to stage one. And so I'm taking away of what I enjoy about the game to do it cooperatively. So it's in this interesting pocket in my collection where 90% of my solo gaming is the Lord of the Rings, the card game now. And it clicked with me, and I'm invested. I don't know that I can ever quite get as invested in another game as I have for this one. Yeah.
Do you have all that fan made content?
I don't have all of it, and that's actually kind of where I drew the line too, because a lot of people like fan made expansions, and a bunch of other games too that are bigger like that will have fan made expansions, and because I think I had to draw the line somewhere, because look at the shelves behind me. Like I eventually got to play something else, but I trust they're very good, because I trust a lot of that a lot of games like that, the designers, the fan designers, care so much about the game, and there's enough of a community to like check each other and test each other's designs that I'm sure it's a just as high quality experience than the game made by Fantasy Flight Games. But again, I just had to draw the line somewhere, so I'm not that experienced with it.
Have you tried them at all? Dipped your toes?
No, I haven't touched it. I'm also a little bit worried that if I do try it, I'm going to want it.
And then you have to spend $600-700 on a whole pack.
You have to get printed.
Yeah. What is it about deck building that's so enjoyable?
It's interesting, because I did try to think about this too in doing the retrospective that you mentioned, and for me, there's a lot of satisfaction when the strategic and the tactical phase of a board game gets that nice clean break, whereas you're 100% in strategic mode when you're building a deck of cards. You're preparing for anything that might happen, but you have nothing definitive. And I enjoy being in that headspace generally, and that's where I have a lot of fun. I actually, for example, I I'm not a huge fan of a lot of very tactical, abstract strategy games like Onitama because I feel like you're right into tactical mode. I feel like it misses something there. So I like the strategic angle of trying to prepare, like do a lot of risk management. And then when you get into the game, you're still strategic early on, and then but it pivots into the tactical mode pretty well. So I think I like that divide. It's also, you can deck build, or if you, thanks to the Lord of the Rings card game having a lot of fan made content. For example, there's RingsDB, which is a great website. You can deck build on your phone while you're waiting somewhere, and then once you get ready to play the game, you say, "Okay, I just got to pull up my phone. I got the deck here. I'll put the cards in, ready to go."
Yeah. The amount of manipulation in that game, of the game or in the game, is probably what makes it so enjoyable for somebody who gets into it. Once you learn the language and you acquire enough to play around with, it is kind of, you can build a unique experience, and you have a lot of oversight over the experience, and then you have a lot of responsibility for what happens, win or lose, over the experience. So there's an ownership that you get to, that draws you in to the experience.
Yeah, and it's I think it goes right up to the line in certain areas that are important that you not step over the line in. For example, there you have the randomness of like an encounter deck of cards, which are the quests that you're playing against, which it's random, but it never, especially with modern the quests that are well designed, it never feels unfair. Like someone would say you roll dice in a game, and if you roll 3 6s in a row, you lose, and like, okay, what are the chances of that? Never really feels like that. So you don't feel like you have agency in the game. And you always feel like there's something you can do with your deck to adjust it, to give yourself a better setup. Because the games play out differently, you could decide, well, if I fail this time, let me try again with the same setup just to see if I got unlucky. Or you could say, I lost so bad, I need to retool it. It's a fun thing you can't get in a lot of the more streamlined, simpler games. There's just there's so much there. Yeah,
I really enjoy the arc of a deck building game, Doom Imperium, Slay the Spire, where you start out with a very simple deck, and then you get to make all these different choices. And then because of the random nature of how you're getting the new abilities or building out the card deck, every game is, that's why Slay the Spire, I have to delete it, because I was just like, oh, how is it going to go this time? How am I going to, how is it going to?
Yeah. And that's funny. I don't know how many people have adopted the same distinction. Like, I try to draw a distinction too between the games where you build the deck in advance, like Lord of the Rings card game, like Magic the Gathering, like that, or most trading card games. I always try to call them deck construction. I hope it catches on as like that's separate, because deck building within the game, like within the game, Star Realm, Slay the Spire is his own thing, and I enjoy that as well too. Some of my favorite games are deck builders like that, but the experience is still very different. And if I go to someone, I say like, oh, the Lord of the Rings, the card game, it's a deck building game, and they expect to play Dominion, they're going to be kind of confused when you start off.
What are some of the big highlights for not co-op games, but games with people, non-solo games? What's the word for a non-solo game, I guess?
Multiplayer.
Multiplayer. Okay.
We've been so in it that we lost that one. So you mean highlights in terms of like,
for
where
you,
the highlights
like
throughout the course of the game?
What makes one work? What makes something, like, we can talk like some of your favorites, and then we can talk about why you like them so much.
I'd say maybe a good comparison for multiplayer games is a few of my top 10. We can pick on either of them too, depending also if you've played them. But Cosmic Encounter I already mentioned before. That's a good one that can, I think, get the best of the multiplayer experience. You have Twilight Imperium, which is the best of the multiplayer experience if you have a day to set aside, and maybe has even the highest upside of any game because it's that epic, or at least of any game that I've played. I find games enjoyable when they lead to exciting moments that feel earned. And for example, if you have a competitive game and you've been playing for 9 hours and everyone's played the game well, and now you're down to the flip of a card who actually wins, and everyone stands up. Like, that's a big thing. When everyone stands up from the table, like, to me, that's a win. You get that with cooperative games too, and you can stand up to say, like, what encounter card are we going to draw? And maybe there's a difference between you're high-fiving your friends because you won together in a cooperative game versus one of your friends is like this because they lost in a multiplayer game, and one guy is like fist pumping, and like that. So that is one of the biggest draws for me. And there are other too. I think people that enjoy Euro games are probably a little bit different because they appreciate the kind of the science of it or the art of like while you're playing the game more, which is its own thing. And I appreciate that, but not enough that those games are usually like at the top of my list. So it's funny because actually it's kind of similar in a lot of ways, like how the upside is just like how it arrives at that conclusion. I think cooperative games are probably more risky because you have so many ways that you could have a pitfalls with cooperative games. For example, the quarterbacking problem where one person telling everyone else to do. But it's also fun you can also argue that it's more fun to win as a team than it is to win individually in a multiplayer game. But at the end of the day, like the best moment for me in the board gaming hobby is when I've busted out a game at a game night or any other situation. And after we're done playing, the other people around the table, if anyone decides they want to take a picture of the box because they want to go buy it, that's that's the peak for me.
Yeah. The co-op games, I guess there's quite a few. I've tried that it's right behind Spirit Island, the kind of basic version that Target put out, Horizons or something like that.
Horizons, I think.
There's something about it that I just didn't like. And then I tried the Pandemic, and there's something about it where I'm like, I just don't. I have to play. We have the Lord of the Rings one, but there's something about playing against the computer or that algorithm, I guess it would be called, that seems dry to me. I don't know why, how that would be different than playing a more complex Euro where you are playing against this pattern and you're streamlining a pattern, but you're kind of building something in the process, like Age of Innovation or something like that. I don't know. Or Feast for Odin is nice because you're owning this map, you're building out this little story and stuff. Yeah. So I don't know. I have to play them more, but I'm wondering when it comes to co-op, what makes it successful?
Yeah, and Spirit Island has always been an interesting one for me too because I love a lot of co-op games. Spirit Island I've never had a great game of Spirit Island actually, even though I admire the design. Spirit Island, it's sufficiently complex that I think hits one of the key ingredients with cooperative games where everyone has what they're doing as part of the game. Like you can't quarterback. Like the game is too complex to really know what everyone else should be doing. Some games try to manage that with limited communication rules, and I always find those kind of annoying, to be honest. Because people will talk, and you have to constantly like rules lawyer sometimes, especially people pushing the envelope of, are we allowed to say this? Like I like to avoid that in a game. Yeah. But Spirit Island, because it's that complex, I've made the mistake of busting that game out when people weren't ready for a game of that weight either. And that can end up being I remember at least one time that was quite a slog, and it being like 2 hours in an afternoon with friends that I hadn't seen in a while and I wasn't going to see for a while again. So I was like, oh, great. I've squandered this opportunity to do something more fun with them. But so that's one of the ingredients is I think you need to find a way that each player feels like they're contributing without making it, either too complex or too contrived that it doesn't work anymore. One other game that's cooperative that I haven't played in a while, partially because I just didn't like it, was Hanabi, which is a game where, I don't know if you've heard of it. Or
is that Hanabi, the fireworks one?
There are fireworks on the box, yeah. And it's like you're not looking at your cards. I'm a little fuzzy on how exactly it works, but to me that game
it's like reverse Strategia where everybody else can see your cards and you can't.
Yeah.
I've never played it, but
it's something like that, right? Because you don't see your cards. And for me, that all the game is, in my experience, was just trying to decide what counts as cheating. Because you just can't tell them what the game is. And I can imagine if people get a nice firm agreement with everyone they're playing of what counts as cheating and they can have fun within that space, that it can be a fun game. But I've yet to successfully do that. And maybe that's because of just luck, or maybe a lot of people have thought the same thing as me.
What are some of your favorites from the past couple years, post Golden Age games?
Yeah. It's funny. I think I've already mentioned I'm a Lord of the Rings fan. I have been very happy with a lot of the coincidentally Lord of the Rings themed games that have come out like over the last year, and
There's
a lot of them are
Fate of the Fellowship. There's quite a
bit. The trick taking game, Fellowship of the Ring trick taking game.
Yeah,
that it might be my favorite cooperative trick taking game. Like it might be just beating out the crew for me. Fate of the Fellowship is probably going to go down as my favorite. I've had so much fun with it that I'm almost hesitant to play it more because I don't want to. I don't want to have a bad game of it. Like it's that good for me. But it's a pandemic system game.
Yeah.
But it's mutated the system enough that it doesn't feel like you're playing just a reskinned pandemic anymore. And it surprisingly fits. Like it fits with the Lord of the Rings theme very well because you. For example, the first time I played the game, I had an instance where I was playing with my wife. It was a 2-player game. And my wife didn't know what to do. She had control over Pip and Mary, who happened to be like hanging out in Rivendell. We're like, well, we got to do something. So she has them use their ability to distract a Nazgul that just dropped the number of Nazgul in Gondor from it was like from 3 to 2 or something like that. I might be getting the exact details fuzzy. But it turned out that ended up being a difference maker 2 turns later and allowed us to win the game because that one less Nazgul was what enabled us like defend Pelargir, which is one of the cities in Gondor, which if we had lost that, it made it harder for, Frodo and Sam would have been able to necessarily destroy the ring. So it was kind of a Lord of the Rings story in a way. It's like these little, because like a big theme in Lord of the Rings is these small acts of mercy or things like that, where you're fighting the good fight, even in place of impossible odds, end up having the almost like the butterfly effect to help the good guys in the end. So it was awesome.
And there's these for anybody who's got to this point of the conversation is not interested in board games. Hello. But what you're describing in that game, there's all these it sounds like a house of cards. Like there's all these different, there's a sufficient amount of complexity on the game dynamic that it's a dynamic kind of board state that you're navigating at that point. There's all these things that can trigger in one way and work off each other. And as a co-op, I guess it's the brilliance of the design of the is it Leacock? Matt
Leacock, yeah.
Leacock, yeah. So he's created and developed over the course of 10 years or however long since pandemic came out, 15, 20, this system that has an emergent property of problem solving. And then you have the emergent, like your deck and your randomness, and then you're having to manipulate that through. And then with the Lord of the Rings skin on it, you kind of have an investment on a narrative level of all these different characters and stuff. And that's the awesomeness of the Lord of the Rings as an IP. There's just so much space in it. And people can access these very complex, abstract rules by filling it up with story.
Yep. Yeah, and you end up having a handful of mechanisms, and if you've played a lot of Matt Leacock's games, you'll notice similarities in them, but they interact in ways, and there's just that unpredictability that it's fun to do the risk management as a team, because everyone will have a little bit of a different opinion on what the most important thing is to do, because no one's perfect at calculating odds. I mean, if you played the game with an odds generator, that would take away the fun of it, but so that's where a lot of it comes from. Is in this case, it's not so complex. It's not like Spirit Island, where the game is so complex that you just can't help everyone out with their hand and things like that. It's more so there are just so many different things that can happen, and there are going to be a handful that are critically bad where you could lose the game, and a handful of times where maybe something's worth the risk and your friend thinks they're worth the risk, but you don't think they're worth the risk. So that's that's a good example of a co-op game that is singing. Everything's working together like that, and the players don't see through the design. Like they're fully immersed in the story as it's going on.
Yeah. The one thing that I don't disagree that often, at least on record, but I'm going to disagree with you, so I apologize beforehand. One thing that I kind of slightly disagree with when you are in your retrospective for the card game, you talk about, you bring up, it's such an excellent construction. You did a very good job just on as a piece of content.
Thank you.
laying it all out. But one thing that you do in the first or second I think it's the first episode, is you talk about all the other Lord of the Rings games.
Yeah.
And one of the major, we just talked about the pandemic system, Lord of the Rings, called Fate of the Fellowship. It just came out this year, and it's a beautiful production. It's just a gorgeous game.
Oh, yeah.
It's really up there. The cost benefit ratio, like how much it costs, what you get in the box, is very well done. Yeah. But then there's this other game. It's this huge box. It's kind of a classic at this point. It's called War of the Ring. Mm-hmm. And one of the criticisms, and you spent like 4 or 5 minutes in your video on, I don't know if I'm violating the terms of the story by playing this game. So I'm wondering if the pandemic game has changed your take, and I should distill your take into, when you're playing War of the Ring, you're trying to get Frodo to Mordor, just like the Fate of the Fellowship. And the Sauron players trying to devour the world, and the free people's trying to stave off Saruman and dunk the ring in. Yeah. But different things can happen in the story that can break your immersion because it's different than the narrative. But it sounds like you were just discussing how Fate of the Fellowship is breaking the narrative, but not breaking the immersion. So I'm wondering if your thoughts on that change, or if the Fate of the Fellowship just does it differently.
Yeah, and it's a great question too, because actually when I made the retrospective and learned the card game, I had not yet played Fate of the Fellowship either. And I probably would have commented on it if I had, but I think there's one key difference with Fate of the Fellowship, and it's the fact that it's cooperative. Because it feels like the diversions from the story are happening to you, and thus you then have to overcome it as a team. Whereas War of the Ring, consciously deciding to take Frodo in a route that he didn't take in the movies because you're trying to outsmart the person sitting across the table from you. Yeah. To me, I think that breaks it more than it does in Fate of the Fellowship. But it's a very interesting distinction, because I don't know that any other games beg the question as much as that does there, because that's a good observation. But I think that's why it felt different for me. And maybe honestly, having played Fate of the Fellowship, maybe that'll open me up to the idea of breaking the narrative a little bit more the next time I play War of the Ring. Yeah. But I think that's important. I think the fact that it's happening to you is key.
I guess that's just where I just don't disagree. Because we got War of the Ring and Fate of the Fellowship at the same time. We tried, it's just me and my stepsons, and 12 and 14. And one's just not that into board games, which is fine. It's totally fine. The other one is, but we played Fate of the Fellowship, and it was way too easy, and the game was broken up because they had to leave, and then they came back, and so it broke. But we played, me and my younger stepson played War of the Ring 3 or 4 times in a row, and what really made it sing for me, one, we have to figure it out, because I think the rules on that game are quite a load, and the rule book is not the best at all. Yeah. Like, there's all these little different things you have to fiddle. There's a lot of fiddliness in it. And I kept on winning as the free folk, so there's something we're playing wrong. It should be a little bit harder, but maybe it's just the RNG, the random number generator. I just got some really good rolls and stuff like that, so which can kind of deflate a game when the randomness kind of upsets the difficulty one way or the other. Yeah, and War of the Ring gets a lot of praise because I think a lot of people play the game and they find that despite all its complexity, somehow it very often will come down like it's close. Very close. And,
yeah, and which is it. I'm not a game designer myself. Like I can't imagine how do you do that, right? Like, how do you do a game that can take so many different directions and make sure it zeroes in? I think that's the hard. But, but just to finish my point, the board state each time we played it was just really interesting, because you never knew how it would go. So I would just and because it's card based, you play cards basically for different actions. It still distilled the narrative elements of the Lord of the Rings as a book into little pieces that you can plug in different ways and have it unfold in a way. And plus the game presence, the minis are kind of cheap, but there's something about it that is really evocative, and you have it all spread out, and it's quite something. I understand why it's so highly rated. Yeah, War of the Rings is also one of my favorite games to buy things on Etsy that can make the game like the board pop, because you can buy like the 3 printed mountains, or I guess you can make your own. things like that. They have the strongholds you can buy, the ones that are themed and 3-dimensional. But yeah, and to be fair too, like when I was distinguishing between War of the Ring and Lord of the Rings, a card game, in my retrospective, we're talking about Lord of the Rings card game being like one of my top 3 games of all time, and War of the Ring being like still in my top 50, which is also saying something because I played like hundreds of games at this point. And actually, if it were more playable and I played it more, I could see it being higher. It's just, it does take a lot to play.
Yeah.
And it suffers a little bit of, I don't know what the exact year is, but it's like pre 2015 rulebook-itis, where it's just like right before we figured out how to do rule books.
Yeah, right.
So it's a little too fiddly.
It's so, I just have to complain about it because it'll define a term up front, but it won't tell you what you're going to have to do. So you have to remember that rule, go through all these other rules, and then finally figure out what they were talking about with the other rule. And then when you're trying to flip through it as a reference book, you find that, and then you're like, well, where's the other part of the rule? What's going on here?
Yeah. I experienced a lot of that too, because I did a video recently where I went back and played a bunch of zombie games for Halloween, and some of the games were around from like 2010 timeframe, and I hadn't played a game like that, at least not a super reputable one, in a bit, and I was immediately reminded of all the ways you can do a rule book incorrectly. Like the one of my biggest pet peeves with the older rule books is they'll do things like give if you have asymmetrical character powers, for example, they'll say a rule and then they'll caveat like in parentheses to say, well, except for this character and that character. And it's like, okay, that's more for me to remember now, I think. And they won't use like bold text where they could use it. Yeah. Things like that. But it's thankfully, as a craft, I think rule books with the growth of board games over the last 10 to 15 years have picked up as well. Modern rule books are much better.
Has there been a little worm in your head to make your own game? You say you're not a game designer.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I have ideas, and I've actually been hesitant. I want to do a video at some point of like, I wish these games existed, but I'm holding out a little bit because I have a few designs that say like, that I think I want to design a board game someday. It's like a bucket list item, at least for me, because I think I have a few ideas that are unique enough that it could be something that connects with a lot of people. I can like allude to them here too. Like, I think people do football games. I don't want to say incorrectly, but I don't think people do football based board games the way that they could and lean into how, like, because I'm a pretty big football fan. Like, I've been, or Jets geared in some of my videos. Like, I've been a football fan since I was a kid, and I don't know how many board game designers are as big of football fans. I'm sure some are, but that might be something where I can provide a little bit of a contrarian idea of like, here's how I would do a football game. And I've had some other ideas to like racing games. That's another thing where I'm just like, I'm also into racing outside of board games too. So I think I don't know if that's how other board game designers do it, but I wonder if that's like where some of the more unique games come from, is people that take some other area of their interest and say, how would I port this in? And you end up, get something hopefully unique. I imagine it's tough when you're designing board games and you're so familiar with board games within the space and you kind of live there for a while, that it's tough to then jump out of the box.
You just kind of reskin it, or you just kind of make one more farming game, like Uwe Rosenberg. I'll just do another farming game.
Yeah, there's an aspect of farming I haven't captured yet. So I mean,
when did you start your channel?
So I started pretty recently. So I'm actually only about 2 years in. Although I started content creation as kind of a side thing a little bit earlier, and it's actually good leading because I just mentioned football. Around 2021, I actually started like a fantasy football blog. Okay. I think a certain amount of I've always worked like as an employee my entire career. So, but despite I've always kind of wanted to create something else of my own. So I started wanting to do something in public. So I made like a fantasy football blog and actually tried to get into the blogging and tried out YouTube for fantasy football. And eventually that actually burned me out a little bit on football because of the weekly schedule. I think with the NFL, like if you want to make content that people see, you have to keep up. And that actually kind of ruined football for me, to be honest. Like I'm still kind of rehabbing like on football after getting burnt out on that like 2 years ago. But I took what I'd learned there, and it said like, all right, well, maybe it'll fit better with the board gaming hobby. So I started the channel. I started off, I was doing some games that videos they might think are review content, but really went out there saying, I want to make videos that no one else is making. And it's been fun. I'm still doing it and I enjoy it. I'm, knock on wood, no risk of burning out on that soon, but yeah, about 2 years in now.
Define making board game videos that nobody else is making.
Yeah. If we were doing this at a little bit later, I think my cat would show up, by the way. I have 2 cats, and one is like clockwork. Like every day at like 5 p.m. he shows up. But
tick, tick.
Yeah. Someone that I know locally in the local like board gaming like groups made a comment once that kind of stuck with me. And it said that all board game content is consumption based. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but I think there's some truth to it because of what percentage of board game videos are reviews, which is really just telling you which game to buy. And a lot of people also
that are top 10 lists, which are kind of just distilled reviews.
Right. So I wanted to get at least some videos out there that were ways to just kind of nerd out on the games you have. And that's what a lot of my Lord of the Rings card game content is. And like, I think the first Lord of the Rings card game video I did was doing the top 10 heroes in the core set. Most likely people are watching that video if they've already bought the game. And then you just get to kind of get more enjoyment out of the game because they can enjoy this video too. Yeah. I remembered I think there was one video on the Dice Tower that was similar to that was made in 2014, but that was a video that I was, as I've been into the game, I like to watch videos on the game, and that one wasn't out there. And that's partially where the idea of my Lord of the Rings, the card game retrospective came from, was I had seen these 3-hour long retrospectives on like certain video games and things like that, and thought, I was like, I feel like this game deserves it. Maybe I'm the one to make it. So that's why I decided to.
The greatest living card game.
Right. Yeah. The world. Yeah. I can't. Well, I use an audio drop in that one, so I can't quite go that low.
Sometimes you don't, and it annoys me. I'm like, where's the audio effect?
Yeah. Yeah. I like to throw that in there. I can go pretty deep, but not quite to that level.
The most recent video about your midlife crisis, I really enjoyed that. I'm like, well, let's see what Jackson's talking about today. And you really opened up. You really brought some of your intellectual, spiritual life to it. What prompted that? Other than to try to justify why you have thousands of dollars of cardboard surrounding you.
Yeah. And I also, my channel by itself is justification for that now. Like maybe that's because maybe that was the secret reason is I didn't want to sell it, so I had to do something with it. So here's a YouTube channel. But yeah, that was it's funny. It's a video where I had not been working on the video necessarily for too long when I posted it. It's actually a little bit of a spur of a moment decision. I was like, what, I'm going to make this into a video, but it was a mental journey that I had been going on. And like I've mentioned in the video, like if when you're going through a midlife crisis, if you have shelves of board games like this, games are probably going to come up if you're trying to figure out like what it is, like how do I tick? Because I think a lot for me of like the midlife crisis moment was coming to grips with, the life so far, like between school and I've been working as an employee and versus like, what have I always kind of wanted to do? And I'm getting older now. Yeah. And, if things, it's, you don't realize necessarily what always when you're working on autopilot and doing things that, I need to do this because this is for my job versus realizing where you have agency in life too. So a lot of that was like kind of coming for a head to me. And I thought the introspection I got on with gaming, which to give the short version, is I realized that growing up, I was always an extrovert, and no one, even though I thought I was an introvert, I was really just the shy extrovert that didn't know quite how to be an extrovert, and games were my way to do that and extroverts get their energy from social situations. So board games were my way of getting energy. Obviously, I know you've seen the video, but for anybody that wants to know the TLDR on that, I thought that was interesting, and I thought that I hadn't seen a lot of videos on YouTube either of people having resolved a midlife crisis. Plenty of videos about people talking about going in and talking in abstract terms about what a midlife crisis is, but no personal stories. I didn't find too many of people saying like, I think I'm out of my midlife crisis and here's how. So I thought this piece of the pie, at least the gaming piece of the pie, because there's more to life than just board games, unfortunately. But there's that. I thought it would resonate with people, and I think some people liked it. I had one commenter too. It said like, "This is the best video you've ever done." So I think that also speaks to people appreciating authentic videos on the topic.
You brought up the board game content, at least on YouTube, being consumption based. And that's kind of the reason why I've started this totally mini-series, and not a lot of people are into it, but that's fine. Because I get a lot of pleasure talking to people who are into this hobby. But I just want to understand like who and why behind the gaming as a hobby, and then I'm on YouTube, so I contact other creators, and there's kind of cordons on who I can talk to and stuff, because my other content is kind of in the way that the American politics stains everything. But the amount of innovation in the art form is just phenomenal. Once you get into it and you go past Catan or whatever, and you look at all these different aspects, and then I think there's probably the life of a board gamer, if they get into the hobby, is they get to a place where they have a shelf of shame, where they're just consuming. They're just consuming and consuming and consuming. Go to the next game, go to the next game. How do you slow down your role in that and really allow yourself to focus into a game? And how do you know when you found a game that's worth dedication and loyalty, I guess?
Yeah, I guess there are a number of ways to look at that. I'll say it took me longer probably to sell any games than most people who hit that triple digit mark with their board game collection. And part of it was because I had an idea for a while too of like, why would I sell a game if, I have young kids, if like when my kids are older, one of them is going to like it. Yeah. But eventually at the point of like, I was like, I don't even want to play this one. I'm going to sell this. And eventually started dialing in. I think it's fair to call a board game. I think it's fair to have it as a collection. I don't feel as compelled though to say like, if you have a board game in your collection, it has because you're playing it constantly. And a lot of people feel compelled about that, to feel that way. Then they'll limit their collection to a certain number, like they'll have like a 1 in, 1 out policy because they feel bad about having space taken up by a game that they're not playing. I think I'm maybe just more shameless as a collector that way. Like I'll be honest, I like having it. Like I like knowing that maybe I'll bust it out. Yeah. If it's only 25% chance I'll bust it out, if it's greater than 0, I could maybe make an argument still to hold on to it because it makes me happy to have it. But as far as but everyone has a limit too. Like whether it's by just literal space, like you actually just run out of space.
And time. Yeah. Space and time.
Yeah, time's the other balancing factor too, because it takes time to play a game. Depending on what your situation is, it's hard to find people to play games, and that's another one where I've got a lot of experience of what it's like to have young kids and be someone that wants to play games and is very much handcuffed in different ways because, I don't want to leave my wife to put all 3 kids to bed when they're bouncing off the walls to go to a game night. If we can say like, all right, maybe there might be a better time later. So like I have to do it. I'm making the decision to play games with even more restrictions and constraints. But I think it comes down to, 2 factors. One is trying to be deliberate about how you use your collection. So if you're a solo gamer, I think that's easier because you can get things done and you can move things through your collection. If you have something like a regular game night, like my regular game night right now is with my biggest regular game nights with coworkers. So I can, I like certain games I know I'll be able to get played. I can bring new games there. It doesn't have to be the same.
In person or virtually?
In person. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
I used to be working in person before the pandemic, and now I'm working remotely, but I'm not far away from people, thankfully, for that purpose. But I also think you still need to have some sort of an outlet for when you make purchases that you're not overly committed to it. Like things like if you buy a board game, maybe don't bust it out of the shrink wrap right away, because if you might need to either bring it to an auction or sell it on eBay or something like that, you'd be surprised at how much certain games go up in value. I was recently looking at the old Timeline games. Have you ever seen those? They came in tins. Very simple game. And I was looking because I was going to I write, for instance, in one of my videos. So I was looking to provide a link to it if people wanted to buy it. And these games that used to be like $10, I would never have expected, are kind of becoming collector's items. Where if you have one of those, I think some were going for like over $100. Like it was, my mind was blown on that. So I inevitably you'll have to find a way to get games out of your collection if they're not going to get played, especially if you're going to be someone that is succumb to fear of missing out a lot. But besides that, it's being deliberate. And I would encourage people too to say, yeah, maybe you feel bad about having a 200 game board game collection, but going back to midlife crisis a little bit too, maybe you wouldn't, and not everyone would feel bad about that if they understood why they have that, because they might feel bad about it because, maybe they're used to, they just want to keep things, they really want to keep things clean, or they feel like they're spending too much on themselves. And like, there could be other reasons why you feel bad about having a larger collection, but you can probably flex a little bit more. It's all based on the person, but I would encourage people to try and, think about that a little bit more, because you're buying games for, a reason. In some ways, buying a game is like the next best thing sometimes to playing a game. And as long as you're not, spending all of your money on it, like it's pretty healthy as far as hobbies are concerned.
That explores the breadth aspect of the question, but what about the depth? Like for you, what causes you to drill into a game and to return to it? Is there an obligation? Maybe it's like, I'm not quite done with that game. I need to give it another go, or there's more in there.
It's a little bit, it's funny. It's tough for me because of the size of my collection, but also probably just because of the time of gamer I have, because I don't even necessarily feel that compelled to get all the way into a game like that. It's funny because if people ask me like what my top games are, obviously I know that. I also make those lists for YouTube, and that's a fun exercise to go through, is know what your top games are, rank them on Board Game Geek. Every game I've ever played, I have at least once I have a rating on Board Game Geek that I update. But people ask me things about like, what types of games do you enjoy? And I've actually sometimes been caught flat-footed with that, thinking, well, I enjoy what everyone else is going to enjoy playing. Like I enjoy party games and party game situations.
Yeah.
And it's I think I'm just that wired that board games are my way of like having fun with others, that when I have a game that I haven't like fully dug into or explored, it doesn't hang on my conscience too much. I have games, I enjoy digging into games deeply, but to be honest, like the fact that I have so many other games too, there's a cost to digging into a game where you're now taking away from another game that you might want to try at least once or something like that.
Yeah. What's some of your best co-op or multiplayer game experiences?
Yeah, I'd say, let's see. Hero Escape has done a lot of those for me. And Hero Escape, it's a miniatures game that's popular amongst board gamers because you don't need to do the miniature painting and terrain building that you do with like Warhammer necessarily. But Hero Escape for me was the game I was into probably up until when I became the Board Game Geek like aficionado that I am. And that's a game where you build a map, you fill up a table with like a plastic map that has like elevation changes. So it's kind of an epic experience. And my favorite times playing those games were, a lot of it was during college. It'd be like my high school friends. We all went off to different colleges. We'd come home for the summer. We'd meet at someone's house. Maybe it'd be like 9 p.m. And we'd be playing this game until like 3 a.m. And sometimes the game would be coming down to like one character has an ability, say, oh, it's going to mind control this other character, but he needs to roll a 20. And it was like, oh, it's a 20. Oh, wait, but hold on. We have to do this first. Roll it again. And like, oh, it's a 20 again. Like, so moments like that are some of my highlights.
Is that like a dungeon crawler, or is it like a battle royale?
It's more of just a big skirmish game.
Okay.
So we were playing, it would be a lot of like, you build points-based armies where units have a certain amount of points that they cost to include them in your team. You like draft your armies, and each you'll have like individual miniatures. You'll have some that are heroes, some that are squads. And we would play team games where you'd have like 3 versus 3, 4 versus 4. They actually did come out with an expansion for that was a dungeon crawl. When the game was originally developed by Hasbro, they eventually sold it to Wizards of the Coast. And Wizards of the Coast tried to turn it into a Dungeons and Dragons property, actually. So there were some dungeon crawling aspects, and you can use the terrain from that game to do dungeon crawl and like replace D&D map. and you can actually do a lot with it. But that's really what it is. It's more of, I would classify it as a skirmish game still.
Mm-hmm. And do you play that still? No, or?
I played a little bit. I'm a little bit still like the nostalgia for that one is strong enough that I'm always going to be playing that at least a little. Yeah. That game got revived in 2024, and it's probably the second most featured game on my channel because it's a game I've been playing for that long. But it's let's see, it's a game where it's a little bit tough to keep up with now. So Renegade Game Studios picked up the license, and they've started releasing content, and it's expensive to just make the miniatures for it, especially when they're coming painted and pre-assembled and everything too. Not to say, unassembled miniatures are also expensive, but it's the price point's gone up enough where I've kind of reached the end of my like completionist collecting for the game. I will still play the game from time to time, and I'm anticipating it's going to be a great game to play when my sons are old enough to actually play the game, because that's if I enjoy it, there's a decent chance that they'll enjoy it too.
Which decade are they in? Their first?
Yeah, so my kids are 8, 5, and 3. My younger two are boys. So they're my
5-year-old is getting there.
Yeah, my 8-year-old, she can play games. She actually beat my wife and I in Cascadia legitimately. Like, so if she wants to learn a game, she can do it. Yeah. And my 5-year-old, though, he's the highest chance of being like the through and through gamer. We're kind of teaching him how to lose right now with some other basic games. But Hero Skip was a fun game for them to open too, because when we open it, you got all the terrain, and my 5-year-old started using it to like build like the map and stuff. We actually used the map he built. It was kind of funny, but
it's a big toy.
Pretty much, yeah.
What about the modern games then that are just peak experience for multiplayer for you? Yeah,
I honestly think that some of the modern, I was going to say modern racing games, but there aren't that many of them. I'm a huge fan of Flamme Rouge, and I recently finally broke out the game Heat. And I love racing as a concept because it's the way you feel when you're in a good racing game is you're trying to push your speed like right to the edge of losing control, or in the case of Flamme Rouge's bike game, you can go fast, but then you run out of like energy too early effectively. So I really enjoy racing.
Is there like a Lance Armstrong expansion where you get like refreshed blood?
I don't think they have the where you get the extra red blood. So I forgot the term for that, but no, I haven't seen that one yet. No licensing from Lance Armstrong yet. But they do have the expansion where you can like make a Tour de France of like the actual game.
So there's not press your luck, but you're pushing the limit, and everybody else is pushing the limit too. And you need to, if you're playing it well, you're doing it a bit of a contrarian mindset of where you don't want to. Like, for example, Flamme Rouge, where a big part of the game is drafting behind everyone else's bikes as you're moving here. And it's like a deck builder with, you have cards that go how fast you go, but it's more of like a deck decayer in a way, because you start with a good deck, and as you use the better card, it gets worse, and you need to preserve it. So you're balancing between staying behind your competitors to try and draft behind them and save your energy versus knowing when to go. And that's the big decision in the game, is knowing when to push it and then try to get a lead. Because if you time that well, you'll get a lead and no one will be able to catch up to you. But if you time it poorly, you're going to go out there and then everyone's going to slingshot past you. So it's an interesting game like that, because you always have to watch your opponents. You can't just focus on, I'm just going to do this as efficiently as possible. I've never heard of Flamme Rouge. That's interesting. I thought it was up to date on all of the games. Is it Flamme? It's Flamme Rouge, right? It's spelled the same. 2 M's.
It's getting a little bit less publicity now, though, because the designer, I think it's Oscar Warren Harding. I think I might have gotten the Warren Harding part, because I think he designed then the game Heat, which is similar in terms of the system. It's a little bit more complex. It's themed now based on like 60s Formula One. But it's a similar idea. A lot of people would say that that's a better game, but it's just Flame Rouge is still a little bit more accessible. Heat's rulebook is amazing. It's like one of the best rulebooks I've seen. Like they actually condense a relatively nuanced system into like 3 pages. But Flame Rouge is the one that's a bit quicker.
It has a very low complexity rating, whatever that means, and it's a really quick game. Half an hour, 45 minutes. So do you usually do a couple of those, or do you want to go on to the next? How do you design a game night? I guess that's a good question.
Yeah. Open-ended. And maybe that's partially because a lot of my game nights are with people who are not always as into the hobby as I am.
Game.
So for example, so when I do like a work game night, for example, I will go into the game night with a few options available. It's its own game, right? It's
a deck building or construction. Sorry.
Right. Yeah. It's game night construction. It's a good engine builder. So I'll usually go in with games that can accommodate the most number of players I'm expecting. Like one game that's great for that is the game Suro, because Suro is a game where you can go up to 8 players. It's a fast game. It's a game where it's like a trying to stay on the board kind of a game.
Okay.
So I'll have something like that. I'll usually classify that as like an appetizer game, something I can play because not everyone's going to be exactly on time, and there are going to be some unknowns in the number of people. So if you get lucky and you have, say, 5, 6, 7 people on the fence and they all show up, you need to be able to bring something out that, whereas if you bring a game like Caverna could play 7, but you don't want to play Caverna with 7 players. I'll usually have a game that covers like the 3-player space, because that's, if you get only 2 people to show up to game night, usually you say like, we'll do it next time. But unless you're like, you played with them a while, you're more likely to say like, well, let's play this. I want to play the 2 version of this. Someone's new to a game night and it's just 2 of you there. That's usually you kind of end up calling it. But games that can handle like the 3 and 4 player space, and usually I have like the ideal like the 5-player game. So an example is I recently went to a game night. I had Flip 7 as my appetizer game, which is a recent game, really good party game. It's like it's similar to blackjack, but it's faster. That was my appetizer game. I came with Blood Rage. I came with, I think it was Concordia. Those were 2. Blood Rage only plays up to 4, but that would have been like the 3 to 4 player game. I came with Concordia because I knew at least one person coming had played it before. And then I also brought Century Golem Edition, which is the Century Spice Road version, which is more of like the Ticket to Ride weight kind of a game. And that was the game to play if we were in like the 5 to 6 player range, or if anyone that came was not quite ready to learn the rules for Blood Rage or Concordia. And in this particular game night, it sorted out that we had 5 of us and one who had never been to the game night before. So we did a few rounds of Flip 7 and got a good round of Century Golem Edition and scooped, and that was the game night. So it was fun. And I had someone actually buy Century Golem Edition after that, so it was a win in my book.
Century Golem Edition? What's the word? Like from Lord of the Rings Golem? Like there's this creepy little guy following you around?
Not that Golem. Golem, in terms of more generic fantasy, Golems.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Century Golem. I'm just looking up because I haven't learned that. You like Concordia? Concordia is interesting. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. There's something about it that makes me angry towards the end. I don't know why. I think it's such an economic game that I get very greedy, and I don't like being greedy. Like there's aspects to board games, and I can't remember which content creator spoke about this. I think it was Corey, but there's certain realms of board games where you're allowed to be kind of evil or bad person, because like that's kind of the game. Then there's like all these other floofy games where you're just trying to beat your own score or doing what do you think about that? Like the morality, the playing around with morality, the kind of escapist aspects of the board games, and like in the kind of generic, more GTA, I'm doing this because I can get away with it and my bad side can come out and stuff like that. Do you have? Is there a moral element, or like kind of a racing game but for morality? How much can I get away with without feeling bad? Like,
yeah, that's an interesting question, because there's, I think, a bigger morality element when you're getting into like a big like hobby game with other people and deciding how much to, if you're getting into it faster than someone else, like how badly you'll destroy them when you play each other. Just for example, if people want to get into, this is probably true for games like Magic the Gathering, but this is true also for if you want to get into like a heavy miniatures game that's its own lifestyle, like Warhammer 40,000. If you want to get into that with a few other people and your friends all like painting and you want to just win, there's, that's not going to be fun. So there's a bit of like a jerk element to that. Yeah. If you go in and say like, okay, I'm going to spend 5 minutes painting my guys and I'm just going to destroy you, where all of you have spent hours painting you guys that are on the board for 3 seconds. I think there's a morality element there. Within other games, I think, games that have a lot of wiggle in the joints invite the question more. I'm trying to think of the best example, though. I think games like maybe Twilight Imperium, where there's a lot of player negotiation and alliance forming going on. And
backstabbing's kind of built in or expected.
It's built in. There's maybe a bit of a don't pick on the new player element to a game like that. And that's probably true with like Catan too. Maybe Catan's the better one to talk about for this because so many people play Catan. But I think there's like an honor among thieves thing of, if everyone is moving the robber in Catan to take advantage of the new player, especially if it's like a kid or something like that, like that, I think you're now crossing the moral line.
Yeah.
But as long as everyone's at an equal skill level, if you can go across the moral line and it's not against the rules, you could say that's the rule. That's the game's problem, not your problem.
Mm-hmm. But it doesn't sound like you're into war games as the niche hobby within, which I think war games are explicitly, you have to win. You have to do everything you can to destroy the other person. So it's kind of built into those games.
Yeah. I'm not as much into like the historical war games. I've maybe dabbled a little bit with that. Honestly, the closest I've gotten to that was probably getting more into some of the tabletop miniatures, but that's like the science fiction tabletop miniatures and fantasy side, which there are a number of pathways into war games. I would imagine I'm going to get more into it over time. And I feel like as you get older, you get more interested in history. So this is going to be happening more and more.
Do you? Is that the thing that happens? After you solve your midlife crisis, you start cracking open pre-World War II history books just to figure out what was happening on the other side.
That's the playbook, right?
Okay. Better than a new wife and a new car.
Yeah. Actually,
speaking morally speaking. Well, I think you covered this on your channel, but maybe not. Why are there red Post-it notes on the games behind you? Yeah,
so those are the games that I haven't played yet. And I was going through, and so it's a non-negligible amount too. Because to be fair, like sometimes when I'll play a game, I will end up, offloading it, whether to sell it or to give it to someone else. But I get a handful of these I haven't actually gotten yet. I think I'm at least happy if I've gotten like at least most of the games played, like probably 2/3 to 3/4. I'm a lot happier. The best I've ever done is I got my collection down to having one game that was unplayed. And then I lost track. I never got to 100%.
What's coming up on your channel?
Yeah. So I'm doing a lot of top 10 lists in December, which is funny because I talked about not doing what other people do. And that's
or December.
I'm deciding what to do because
December just means the 10th month. You were playing around with the word game. I'm like, no, that means DEC means 10. It was already there. It was already there.
Yep. Yeah. And that's why it's like, that's kind of I like to kind of make fun of myself in the videos too. Like it's because I know like there's a 10 December thing, but I also, we all know too that like December isn't actually the 10th month, but like the silly bugle I do and stuff. I was like, oh, this is a silly idea, but and I like to think too, like my videos that I make more entertaining because editor me makes fun of recording me a lot. Yeah. So but that's what we got. A lot of top 10 lists. I'm going to do an update to my top 10 games of all time. Last year I did a top 50. And so I'm just going to update the top 10 because my top 10 list, I try to make it more like a top players of all time list than like a sport where if I played Catan for 10 years, it's going to be high on the list, even when I'm not playing Catan as much anymore. So there's not as much churn year to year, but I will be updating my top 10. Planning to do some of the other top 10 lists that I haven't really hit yet, like top cooperative games, top two-player games, things like that.
Break it down by genre. Are there any clever ways of doing a top 10 list that you have up your sleeve?
I was thinking I want to do a Mount Rushmore video, which would be like the Mount Rushmore of worker placement games, or
Yes.
the Mount Rushmore of, I could say like the Golden Age of board games or something like that. The Mount Rushmore of Reiner Knizia games. Like there are probably
Yeah.
different top games list styles that I want to deploy that are
Yeah.
in there, but also I want people to find them too. Top 10 is a very good keyword to get
Yeah,
people.
no. Yeah, I'm sure that I know that that's what keeps it's like the Black Friday for board game channels is the 10 December thing that's going on.
Yep. Yeah, I had to get a top 10 word
I
in
don't
there.
know if there has your retrospective. Somebody did a retrospective on, I believe it was Avalon Hill, which is one of the earlier board game companies, specifically in the war game. But it would be cool to see a video that would be like a Mount Rushmore. Like here's where, because we all know that games are. Cole Worley's a designer, and when I listen to him, I like listening to him because he's very academic, and he talks about having a conversation. So all of his games are having conversations with other games and just thinking about it in those terms. But we see that a lot of these mechanisms migrate from one place to another, and it would be cool to see like where are the fountainheads for these, and then when does somebody come along and reinvent by taking all this conversation to the next level, or by putting elements together that haven't been before and creating a new genre. Like Pandemic is kind of the fountainhead of this cooperative and stuff like that. So there's a lot of interesting historical based perspectives.
Yeah. And to be honest, like a lot of people's like path through the hobby probably follows those lines to an extent too, especially because there are areas where you can jump from one hobby to another and you're doing it through those type of lines. I've always been kind of surprised that more people don't have, I guess, my personal hobby mix where they're into, like, for example, you could walk from board games into like casino games, and then you're one step away from like sports betting. And like there are some mechanisms. Some of the best board games are ones that'll take mechanisms from like a casino game. Like you could say Flip 7 took a blackjack mechanism and imported it. I know a lot of the mechanisms in modern board games come from Avalon Hill war games. Like in the most famous example is probably Root, which when that came out, a lot of people wanted to point out like, oh, this is a counterinsurgency game. And there's a whole genre of counterinsurgency games in wargaming. So that would be interesting. I don't know. Yeah, I think for me to be the one to do that video with the wargaming angle, I need to get more into war games. But there's definitely other areas where that would be interesting and to try and track the flow, because also like Board Game Geek has a great database. Like, you can filter by mechanic and probably
That's true.
Figure out what sources.
That's true. So I guess we can end the interview with kind of a cheesy question. Like intro game. Top intro game, like introducing somebody to the hobby, top midweight game, and then top like crunchy or like top gamers game. Probably it doesn't have to be complexity, but the more gamery game.
Yeah, let's see. I think for top intro game, I'm gonna go with Deception: Murder in Hong Kong, because it's a social deduction game. And I think if you want to get an intro game and start to blow people's mind a little bit about what modern board games are like, a social deduction game where someone that works well, where, someone's in Deception Murder in Hong Kong, someone's the murderer and you don't know who it is. So people can understand that because it's kind of like games of like Mafia or Werewolf. But it does it well. It's my favorite version of it and can go up to 12 players. I think that's a good, I'll put that one as my intro game.
Does it work with lower player count? Like, do you need at least 6 or 5 for it?
I think you need at least 5. I played it once with 4 that it's kind of work.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of games are like that, unfortunately. As far as a good midweight game, I'll keep going with the social angle too, because you could argue there's like a different midweight game if you're more into like the mechanisms versus the social element. I'm still going to say Cosmic Encounter for the good midweight game, because to me, it's like it takes a lot of the negotiation aspects of games like Catan and takes it to another level. Because the beauty of Cosmic Encounter is the game is self-balancing. So if anyone's listening that's curious how this works, it's a game where it's like uses a war mechanism. So the old card game where you have, you just flip over a card and see who has the higher number. It takes that, but everyone gets their own alien race with its own ability. Some will say like your ships are more powerful. Some will say, you get to change your card afterwards. Some will say you're actually trying to lose, things like that. And before every encounter, which the game decides, you're deciding who you can invite people to ally on your side if you're in the encounter. So the game is self-balancing because people will team up whoever they don't think a threat is. And so it balances off that some alien abilities are stronger than others because you can, because no one's going to team up with that person. So it's a really fun design there. That's another one where you need at least 5 because having a 4-player game, you're either 3v1 or 2v2 in alliances, and it doesn't work as well.
And it doesn't. It probably doesn't dynamically change as much at a higher player count.
Yeah, unfortunately, I know people too that played it, had a great session of 5 players, tried to play it with 4 players, like play with the neighbors, and as they're the one to bust it out, everyone just ganged up on them, and then the other 3 players, they were content to all tie. So that's not really what you want to go for. So I'd say that is the midweight game. And honestly, to stay on brand, I'd say then if you want to really get into something, Twilight Imperium is probably the next one on top of that. And so that's where you have, it's another one. If you want my recommendations, you have to like alien abilities, I guess. Because Twilight Imperium is a game, to put in perspective, about an hour into the game, you will start voting on laws for the galaxy, if that gives an idea of the scope of it. So you're trying to get to 10 victory points, but it might be 2 hours before you get your first victory point. You're colonizing planets, you're developing alliances publicly and secretly, and the games usually take at least 6 hours. And often when you want to play that game, you have to create a sign-up genius so that you make sure you have people that are available and get enough players that you have the full game.
And that's again a 5 or more player count game?
That one I can do 4. That one I think you can do 4 with Cosmic Encounter and it'll work. But yeah, 4 to 6 might get a little long with 7 or 8. I think you need the expansion to get 7 or 8 off the top of my head. But yeah, that's another one sweet spot, which in my opinion too, that's the sweet spot for what my favorite board games do, is how do you make the best, take advantage of being with about 5 or 6 people. So that's my 3.
Jackson Warfield, is that your real last name? Because that's an awesome last name.
Yeah, well...
Okay, sorry, I don't want to violate internet and on enemy rules, but awesome last name, awesome channel, really enjoy your content. I'll link to it in the description, and I guess you're going to be doing their top 10 lists and stuff, so people will be able to check out your content. But you do rather deep dives. I enjoy it, but you bring a lot of your own self into the game, so it's very unique game, the content and stuff. So it's very unique, it's very you, and it's not derivative at all. It's in conversation with other people who are doing the same kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me. This was fun. I'm always enjoyed talking with other creators, as YouTube creators, especially those with board game interest. And yeah, it's funny how the channel worked. Like you said, the playlist hasn't necessarily got a ton of views yet, just because of the algorithm. I think it's it really doesn't know what to do with it. But I'm happy to be I'm honored to be the 5th guest. I think it's the 5th guest, right? On the list. Yeah.
For my little side gig, my little side slice of board game content. Yeah, no, I think you are the 5th. I had my little research thing up here, but it's gone now. But yeah. But thanks for adding yourself to my roster.
Yeah.
And have a good holiday season.
Thanks. You too.
Will do. Cool. That's the